All right, my Psychians, buckle up. This one's an important one. Not to say all the other ones aren't important, but this one has lots of info, okay? So this is modules 48 to 49. We are going to be learning about the other two theorists. So we went through Piaget, which was cognition and development. Now we're going to go through Erikson and Kohlberg, and they focus on different aspects of development. So each theorist kind of covers a different lens. And remember, Piaget was cognitive, so now we're going to dive in to the next two and also go through the teenage to adulthood stages as well, because Piaget was mainly just for the child developmental years. So these other two go throughout a lifespan. So before we get started, the first theorist we are going to tackle, so we already had Piaget, which is cognition. We are going to go dive into Erik Erikson. I know, what a name. Erik Erikson. And he created approximates, it's like spectrum. So remember, Piaget was stuck in stages. Erikson was all about the spectrum. He did do you see? So he has an age range, not specific, and he doesn't believe that, you have to go through at certain times. So he created more of a spectrum, and that's something really important to write down. So Erik Erikson, he focused on social and cultural aspects that lead into development, or shall I say, factor into development. And we'll go through these stages. So Erik Erikson. Okay, so for this one, let's just go through each of them together. So first, we're going to write down kind of a little bit of his bio. So he is the one, for the psychosocial development and identity formation. Erik Erikson, his theory of psychosocial development stressed the importance of social and cultural influences and personality throughout the stages of life. Piaget, all cognition, didn't take into any of this aspect. So what Erikson did is he created versus stages. And so my mnemonic for him is E verse E. I know it sounds weird, but his name is E and E, but his stages are verses. So they're issues that a child has to go through with personality development when it comes to social and cultural influences. So for this aspect, you guys don't have to write down the task description, but I do want you to write down the stage and the issue that it presents. So we'll start with infancy, and I'm sorry, I totally forgot to, do these one by one, but hopefully we don't feel too overwhelmed. So stage one, infancy to around a year old. Erikson believes this first stage, and this is very popular in the AP test, trust versus mistrust. Within this stage, a child needs to know if their needs can be met. Can they develop a basic sense of trust? And this also ties in to the Harlow and the Monkeys attachment in Mary Ainsworth, right? Because secure versus insecure attachment, that falls under this issue, right? So can not necessarily your child, but does this child have its basic needs met so they can trust their caregiver? Okay, so that's the first stage. The second stage that comes around, and this is between ages 1 to 3, again, more on a spectrum. Erikson didn't really think that at this stage, you don't have to be you don't have to be 1 to be going through this stage, right? So he's on a spectrum, remember that. In toddlerhood of 1 to 3, it's the autonomy versus shame and doubt. So in this stage, children are trying to learn to exercise their will to do things by themselves, or they might start to doubt their abilities. So, if Sally is trying to pick a game to play and she wants to do this one, right? And she wants to start picking and making her own choices. Do her parents support that? So she starts doing that more, or does she feel more shame and doubt about maybe, my parents don't like it when I play this game or whatever. Maybe I'll just, it creates shame or doubt in their own abilities. So this is where they learn to either start, exercising their own kind of choices, or they might be shamed or start to doubt themselves. And now we're in preschool, and this is the initiative versus guilt stage. And this is where, preschoolers are trying to initiate tasks. They're going to be like, hey, Sally, Bill, and Jimmy, do you want to play hide and seek? And let me tell you the rules, right? Or, let me be a leader and do this. So they start to show initiative, or they start to feel guilty about their efforts to be independent. So, maybe a friend that's like, "Ooh, I'll just play whatever Sally wants to play." Like, she gets mad at me when I try to start new games or whatever, right? So again, when we go through these stages, we're talking about one or the other, right? So it's the verses. So they're kind of clashing to see which one will win, right? So not win, but the one that kind of dominates, right? And then now we're going to hit the elementary school phase. And this is 6 years to puberty, according to Erickson's scale. So this is also where we're going to move on and kind of get into this adolescence phase of adulthood or of development. And it's industry versus inferiority. This is the stage where children learn the pleasure of applying themselves to tasks. So they get really like they're so proud that they made this at school, they want to bring it home, right? Or they're starting to feel inferior, right? So, do they feel less than their friends? Or is there, maybe there's, something going on, other factors, right? But this is the industry versus inferiority. Are children going to start applying themselves to tasks? Or are they going to start backing away and feeling like they're not worthy of whatever, right? So these are the first 4 stages. There's more. So in your little Erickson notes, I don't know however you want to set it up, but there will be more stages after this. So you can either leave a little blank spot or you can kind of just go with the flow of the notes, which is kind of more of a time span. So that is kind of the aspect of young childhood to early adulthood on Erickson's view. And are we gonna click? Oh, there it goes. Okay. This picture never gets old. Oh, Justin. Anyway, so now we're entering into adolescence. And this is the transition period between childhood to adulthood, extending from puberty to independence. And these are just little comments, but a period of stress marked by peer pressure, alienation from parents, and lack of sense of direction. Or do you think it's a period of enhanced friendships, heightened idealism, and openness to life's possibilities? So wherever you may fall, it's kind of like a teenage roller coaster, right? You could be one this day, the one the next. So again, my friends, I just want to oh gosh, middle school pictures are so awful. Anyway, so we're moving on. So now we're hitting the adolescence era. And this is Erickson's adolescent stage. So it's not in the graph that I just showed you a little bit ago. So this is stage 1, 2. So this is the 5th stage. This one's going down here. I just wanted to kind of point it out and spend some time on it. So this stage is called identity versus role confusion. And this is also very popular on the AP test. This is high school. So this is Erickson's stage for high school. And this is where we struggle with who am I and what roles do I need to adopt in my environment. So this is where Sally's going to choose, am I going to be independent, not caring what people think and I have my own style? Or am I going to adopt to what my friends are doing and mold to what they're doing so I feel kind of, accepted? So it's almost like you want to be like, are you going to choose your own individual identity, or are you going to kind of pick a role that may not be forced upon you, or it is, right? So it's essentially the who am I stage. Are you going to be independent and unique, or are you going to kind of develop into this other role of whatever your society wants you to, right? Yes. So now we're at puberty. I know everyone's like, Miss H, and I'm like, I know. So this is the period of sexual maturation during which a person becomes capable of reproduction, right? So again, evolutionary lens, we survive to mate, to reproduce, right? And this is just what's going on in our body, right? Our hypothalamus is just on fire with the pituitary gland releasing all these hormones for us, right? So on top of trying to figure out who the heck we are, we got a bunch of hormones flowing through our body, right? What else could we want? And these are just some interesting facts. To be fair, this was from my oral textbook, and I really liked the slide because I get to click on things. But these could be out of date. But this is just kind of the average of when these mile markers happen. But I do know that something interesting. A woman's first period has now dropped from 12 and a half to, I want to say it's like at 11. So there's been studies shown that women are becoming more mature at earlier stages. And I don't know if it's a factor of genetics, environment. There was this whole spiel about like something in the milk. whatever we have, my friends. But for women, we are starting to mature younger. That is something that is happening in our society. So just, you don't write this down. I just, fun facts. So something else that's like going on brain-wise, right? And you don't write this down. This is just something for you to look at. Or you can write down the volumes. Remember gray matter. And this means that there's gray matter and then there's none. So the purple means that there's lack thereof. And remember, gray matter is like filing cabinets. Look how much we have when we're younger. And as we grow up, we fill the filing cabinets in our brain with more neural connections and more neural pathways, and our brain starts to get full. How cool is that? Anyway, just wanted to show you the progress. Also, some fun facts, parent to peer relationships. During adolescence, something happens, right? And this is where, and I talk to you guys about this all the time, which is why I was really worried about social isolation with COVID, is that according to developmental psychologists, younger kids depend on their mental health and social support from their parents. But as you get older and more into high school, you start to go more towards your peers for social and emotional support, which is why, we're in a time of social isolation and everyone's going through things and they can't be with their people, So, yeah. Anyway. Okay. So now we're going to do a little squiggle in our notes. We do have some last minute Erikson stages later on, but those are later in life stages. So we are going to begin going over Kohlberg's 3 kind of realms. And it's 3 realms that used to be divided, and I have them still divided, but the new AP test, the new AP book has them kind of in chunks. So I'll go over that in a minute. But Kohlberg is our 3rd developmental theorist and the 3rd important person we have to go over. So we have Piaget with cognition. We have Erik Erikson with social cultural steps. Kohlberg is the one who created the moral development. He wanted to know how our morals developed throughout our lifespan. How did we develop them? How were we ruled by them? Our moral compass. Think of this as your superego. I'm sorry, I gotta watch text. But so think, again, 3 stages, and we'll go through each, but this is our moral compass. So he's the one who came up with our identification for morals. Alrighty, let's get started. So it will be in this format. So if you want to start kind of creating the format, but in our old textbook, they used to cut them in half with stages. But for now, you can just merge them. Unless you want to do the stages, that's fine. But the really big one is right here. So this is the main definition of the level. And then there's kind of a 2-type stage within the level, but with our new textbook, they're really only focusing as a chunk. So you, if you want, can take out the stage numbers 1 and 2 and just kind of write kind of how it works, because each level kind of goes through steps. And so the first stage of Kohlberg's moral development, and remember, Kohlberg is also on a continuum. If you notice, there's no age ranges. Right? So he's also on a continuum when it comes to the stages versus continuity question. And he has his first stage, which is called the pre-conventional level. Pre-conventional level. And he believes that moral reasoning is guided by external consequences only. No internalization of values or rules. So essentially, this is the punishment and obey moral code. So when kids start to grow up, the right thing to do is obeying the rules to simply avoid punishment, right? They don't want to get in trouble, right? There's no other cognition really happening with, I shouldn't do this because, I need to eat my vegetables. It's going to help me grow big and strong, and so I can do this, right? They're not really thinking that. They're thinking like, I got to eat my veggies so mom doesn't get mad at me and I don't get punished, right? And this second stage, it follows after it, right? So this is kind of like a blending, right? And the second stage is kind of the mutual benefit stage, where the right thing to do is a fair exchange. So this is the part where it's like, kids who are really obsessed with, you need to play fair and you need to play by the rules, right? They're really big on playing fair. So essentially, during this stage of the pre-conventional level, we have dictated by punishment and obedience, and it also kind of bleeds into, having a fair exchange. Are things fair, right? Do you have enough do you have as much dominoes as I have, right? Or whatever game you're playing, but it's dictated by fair play. right? And if you ever have a younger sibling, you know how important it is for like all the rules have to be followed, or they're like super upset. So anyway, this is the pre-conventional level of Kohlberg's moral development. Okay, so I always think of this as the punishment and obey, right? I'm thinking about it's reward and consequences driven, right? And then we go into Kohlberg's second stage, and this is the conventional level stage. And this is where moral reasoning is guided by conformity to social roles, rules, and expectation that a person has learned to value. This is when society hits us, right? This is when our peer influence comes in. This is where our parents' influence comes in even more so, right? Our environment really controls this one. So, and there's two types of levels that we go into. And usually people, tend to fall around stage 4 of this conventional level, and people usually hover around there for a lot of their lives. But we'll go into the third stage too, where people hopefully can get in with their morals. So this right or wrong stage is being a good person and conforming to our social expectations, like going to school, getting good grades, right? Showing concern for others and following the rules, right? So I always like to say stage 4 is like getting your driver's license. Because it's kind of like your first thing where you're like, you have to take a test, you have to learn all the rules of this, right? So I always think of like stage 4 as like, it's law and order, but it's also when you get your driver's license, right? The right thing is helping maintain social order by doing one's duty, obeying the laws because they're laws. So when you start driving, you follow all the rules so you stay safe, and showing respect for authority simply because they're authority, right? So this is where you know to pull over if a cop pulls you over, right? Or listen to a doctor if they're talking about, if you're sick or not, right? Because you listen to authority because you have learned to value certain aspects in your life. And so this is the law and order stage. This is where our morals are guided by obeying laws and being a good person in our society that we're in, right? And so for the most part, a lot of people tend to be in stage 4, and that's fine. Like a lot of people tend to hover here. But let's look at the last third level, which is the post-conventional. And, this is and just in your notes, this requires a really intellectual being along with empathy for this last stage. It's very heavily empathetic, and that's why not a lot of people get here. But let's learn what this is. So this is our part of our moral reasoning, which is guided by our internal values and principles and morals. So this is where you actually become independent and find what you are passionate about, right? So you could be, this is maybe where you join a club that's trying to better our climate, right? Or, go to protests with, I don't know, right? So this is where you start making your internal values known and your moral compass known, right? And so the first part of this post-conventional level is the right thing to do is helping protect the basic rights of all members in your society, principles that promote value, fairness, justice, equality. So essentially you sticking up for other people and the rights of, if you see someone being mistreated, you'll stick up for them. But remember, these stages require high amounts of empathy because it's not about you, right? This kind of third stage, these are the people that are activists. These are the people, and this is not just for activists, right? This could be anyone. We could all be active in our community in different ways, right? But this requires you to have a really good sense of yourself and your moral compass and what you stand for. And stage 6, some people won't ever get here. And that's fine. That's fine. But when people reach this stage, the right thing to do is to determine by your self-chosen ethical principles that reflect your ideals, equity and human dignity. I kind of think of this as like Gandhi. I think of this as like kind of like the most peaceful, like this person, like you are the most self-actualized you'll ever be, right? And this is kind of the stage where it's almost like the philosophy stage as well, where people might start to question values of their society, right? So it's kind of like the question, like, how would you judge someone? So this is a question, right? And you can think about it. how would you look at someone who stole life-saving medication for their spouse to live that they couldn't afford? That's where the stage 6 would come in, because it's almost like you are looking at the rules, but then you have your ideals and how can you stick, you know what I mean? So think of this as the top of Maslow's hierarchy when you're here. And I always imagine Gandhi or like Buddha or someone who's just so peaceful is up here. But those are the 3 stages of moral development. And we can land in any of them, right, as we grow up. And again, as we grow more empathy, the 3rd stage is more possible, right? And the more we educate ourselves, the more we grow up and experience life, right? Okay. So real quick, Carol Gilligan, sorry, I always say Gillian, it's Gilligan. Just a few critiques of Kohlberg's theory. Kohlberg, his research was mainly only on boys. Fun fact. But they have updated his research since. And women, we do tend to differ, like in some aspects, but for the most part, that was one of their critiques. And based on her research, she argues that many women don't fit into the post-conventional stage, not because they're less moral than men, but because they tend to be more relational, and the lower stages focus more on caring for the needs of others, right? So again, just some interesting aspects on that front. So it's good to write these down for the critiques. So now we are kind of on the stage of the emerging adulthood. So we're going to kind of more go towards and finish up the Erikson stages. And so for some people in modern cultures, a period from late teens to mid-20s, bridging the gap between adolescence dependence and full independence. And these are just some interesting stats, just like I talked about. This is from 1890. So again, how much has changed? So 1890, 1995, I would love, our book didn't have this stat for our new one for the 2018, but I would guess, I would usually talk about this in class, right? So here's the interval back in the 1890s. There would be a 7-year gap before marriage after a woman is now menstruating. In 1995, there's a 12.5 gap. And I bet you now, as women are now more independent, don't need to have children right away, right? We have all these technology skills. I would say the gap has grown, right? So just something interesting to take away. So in adulthood, physical changes, there is a vocab word called senescence. I know. You're like, what word is that, Miss H? And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't create the word. It's a gradual physical decline related to aging. It's essentially, we get wrinkles, right? So senescence occurs in everyone and every body part, but the rate of decline is highly variable between persons. So have you taken care of yourself? If you smoke cigarettes for all your life, you probably have more wrinkles, right? So again, there's different factors that go in with aging, but senescence is essentially aging, right? It's us getting wrinkles. So just some quick little stats. Physical changes in later life. So our eyesight, my friends, tends to go right. Okay, look at 70. That's what we're looking forward to. 70, eyesight's gone. My friends, my eyesight's already going, so I don't really know where I fall on that spectrum. And these are just averages. And then, percent correct when identifying smells. Okay, apparently smells you still keep until you're around 80. My grandparents are like 85, and they eat the most bland food. It's like, wait, do you not have taste buds anymore? Anyway, guys, it's a situation. Also, percent correct when identifying spoken words. That is, guys, 70 is just really the age, man, where we all decline. But anyway, something to look forward to. So kind of getting into adulthood commitments, right? And we want to think of these 2 terms before we kind of go into Erikson's later stages. We have generativity, which is being productive and supporting future generations. This usually starts to come about as we grow older into our maybe becoming a grandparent, right? Or watching younger kids grow up. And so also there is a need for intimacy. And when I say intimacy, it doesn't mean sexual. It doesn't have to. It means just forming close relationships, right? So that's why, we think of, adult homes. And there's a reason that, when you're older, you really don't like being alone actually degrades your life, right? So we want to keep those relationships. And also it keeps our brains stimulated. So these are the last 3 stages of Erikson. So if you want to go back to our other Erikson portion of your notes, or you can just kind of finish it off here. These were part of his after, this is young adulthood to late adulthood, right? Um, so he's the one who kind of looked at our 20s to 40s, 40s to 60s, and 60s and up, and what people are struggling with. So for this one, in young adulthood from 20s to 40s, it's the intimacy versus isolation. And this is the kind of the stage I'm in, and I see it in my friends all the time, right? So I'm post college, I'm, 5 years off of whatever, or, post college, post credential, now teaching, right? And a bunch of my friends were in the marrying stage, right? So, I'm in the marrying stage, and it's like, from 23 to about 33, you're going to weddings like every year, right? And it's kind of the point of someone's life where young adults struggle to either form close relationships and gain intimacy, or they feel socially isolated. So, I have some friends. I have a friend who's, she's single, and she's getting really, like, she's starting to make comments like, "Oh, you guys are all gonna have kids soon," and, la, 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 and, this is where we start to struggle of, like, do we have good close relationships, especially after high school where, like, I still talk to, I have a group of high school friends, but I also still have a really bigger group of college friends, right? So it's natural to kind of like drift apart, but this is where, you struggle with intimacy versus isolation. Where are you in that aspect of your life? This is the midlife crisis. So you can say generativity versus stagnation. This is the midlife crisis stage. But in the middle age, people discover a sense of, are we contributing to the world? Are we helping the world, right? Usually through family or work, or are we feeling stuck, stagnant? This is where people may make a big job change, right? So some teachers who, were scientists first might switch to teaching to be there, like, I need more purpose in life, right? That happens all the time. I just happen to choose teaching from the get-go, my friends. But it's common for people to switch jobs later on in life, right? So for me, maybe later on, I couldn't imagine leaving the classroom. I love you guys so much. But I think it'd be really cool to be an educational coach for other teachers that need help with tech and stuff. So that's maybe something I'm looking at later on. And, maybe I'll get a master's in psych, even though, I should get it in English since my BA's in. Anyway, so I got things to think about, but this is where they're at, right? And then late adulthood, integrity versus despair. And this is when a lot of reflecting happens in life. And you're either happy with how you lived your life, or you're kind of cranky. So for example, I have one grandma, it's my dad's grandma. She's awesome. She's like helping me, like she's like doing a lot of sewing for my wedding. She's awesome. She's happy. She's happy with her life. My mom's side, my Nana, she's grouchy. She's cranky. All she does is complain about her, like, I should have done this in life. I should have done this, right? And it's like, so there's two stages. There's like those two aspects, right? Are you going to be happy with the way that you left your life, or are you not, right? And then it leads to that. So these are the end of Erikson's stages of the psychosocial development. And remember, I say E versus E. He's the versus stages. And just kind of now the death and dying, so we're kind of like rounding the corner, my friends. There's something interesting though. The year of a spouse's death, especially in the older population, there is such a thing as dying of a broken heart. And I don't know, and this is what I usually talk about in class, right? So just for example, my great grandma, Jenny, she was amazing. She was cognitively there. But when my great grandpa passed, she died within a year of was it 2 years after his death? Like, it was a rapid decline, my friends. And this is kind of where, as we get older, our bodies are really dictated by our mindset, right? And that's also why older folk homes are so really beneficial, because usually a lot of them are widows, right? And they need to branch out and have that intimacy, the relationship, and again, not sexual, but just being close to people, right? So that is also kind of a correlation that is connected, right? And so this is the last slide, and this is from our book. I believe it's from an older book, so that might not be your page number. But I really liked how they put these three theorists. So if you notice, just a really quick recap, we have Piaget, who focused mainly early childhood, right? And then Kohlberg did 3 across a lifespan. And then Erickson did his in little chunks, right? But do you notice, so Piaget, there's a reason that like his is really stuck in stages, right? And these 2 are on a continuum, okay? And so maybe it would be helpful to just kind of see how they're kind of related close by to each other. And that's the end of this lecture.